Tales of Ironroth, Gallywix's Exodus. Written by Kaiser. Azshara, Gallywix's Pleasure Palace. Interior. The Pleasure Palace of the Goblin Trade Prince Jastor Gallywix was far from its previously glorious state. The once lavish and decadent estate that symbolized the Trade Prince's power was in a state of turmoil. Its condition was chaotic, as if a tornado had forced its way through the halls of the palace. Paintings torn from the walls, furniture that once gleamed with priceless jewels are now pried bare, and vaults that once flowed with gold are empty. Anything and everything will be tossed around in a mad dash to claim anything of value that can still be snuck away. All of this was performed by a gaggle of hobgoblin mooks under the employment of the Trade Prince. Following their orders, they would shove whatever they could into sacks to be carried outside. Nothing was to be left behind to fill the pockets of horde looters and enemies of Gallywix. Deeper within the near-abandoned estate, the beating heart of Gallywix's wealth resided. A once impenetrable vault door was now wide open, with the untold wealth within radiating a near-blinding light of pure gold. Jewels, gold bricks, and coins of various shapes and sizes were scattered around in a disorganized fashion, gleaming and begging to be claimed. Already, some had been taken away by Gallywix's mooks, with it barely putting a dent in the treasure trove that could build Gallywix 10 more pleasure palaces. And in the center of it all, Jastor Gallywix will be fighting to save it. Down on his knees, the Trade Prince struggled to shovel coins into a sack with his pudgy hand, while beads of sweat dripped from his brow. The clock was ticking, and Gallywix knew this. The moment news had arrived to him of the siege's failure, he knew he couldn't just sit around and wait for Garrosh to turn his sights on him.
Damn rebellion! That moron Vol'jin just had to get himself killed. Now we're all down in the deep end. Cost me my palace, my harbor, my gold. Ain't nobody gonna think about me! Get a hold of yourself, Jastor. This is just a poor investment. Nothing more. You can financially recover from this. We'll be sailing out of here to more pleasant shores soon enough. Just need to get to the yacht in the harbor. The world is my oyster, and I'm cracking that baby wide open. Maybe I'll do a good old-fashioned corporate takeover on Booty Bay, or venture company operations up in Northrend. Kalimdor is no longer profitable. This dustball can go to Garrosh for all I care. Jastor Gallywix ain't gonna be tied down, no sir! Ah!
Rising to his feet, Gallywix would swing the sack of valuables he collected over his shoulder. Inside, the sound of clinking coins and jewels could be heard with them rustling about as the Trade Prince began to depart from the vault. Upon exiting, a pair of hobgoblin mooks awaited him and were ready to escort him outside to his means of escape. One currently carries a jade Pandaren statue, a prized find from the recent expeditions to Pandaria.
Let's hit it, boys! We're done here.
As Gallywix and his escort began to depart from the palace, the hobgoblin carrying the jade statue would trip over an abandoned picture frame, losing their grip on the priceless artifact. It would not be long before Gallywix would hear the sudden loud crash of the statue against the marble floor. Its elegant design would be left in a series of shattered pieces. An artifact that has survived centuries was a casualty of the war being waged.
Oh, sorry, boss.
You bolthead! You know how much that thing would have earned me on the market? That's coming right out of your paycheck. Smash another and you can wish your spot on the yacht goodbye.
From outside the pleasure palace, one could hear the distant sounds of the horde war machine and spot the rising smoke from the remnants of the siege. An ominous sign of what will happen to Azshara once Garrosh lays his sights upon it. Gallywix had no intention to be around when the worst case scenario comes knocking on his front door. He hoped to be long gone before anyone would ever realize he was no longer in Azshara. Parked on the Pleasure Palace golf course, a goblin-made hot rod was being loaded with sacks of valuables by hobgoblins to join Gallywix in his escape. This hot rod was to be his escape vehicle to reach Bilgewater Harbor and his yacht, which was currently docked. If all goes according to plan, it should be a straight shot over there. As Gallywix departed from the interior of his pleasure palace, he could not help but note the absence of the rest of his palace staff. No bartenders manning the counters, no waitresses serving rum and cajacola, not even the pool boy was here sifting out leaves from the hot tub. They all had run off when news of the siege failing had reached Azshara. Gallywix couldn't help but scoff at their absence.
Good for nothing ingrates, who needs them?
Entering the back seat with two mooks flanking his left and right, Gallywix would get himself comfortable while a third mook finished loading what they could get. Stuffing sacks into the trunk, which would soon be tied down by rope when it was well beyond its carrying capacity, the mook would soon claim his place at the helm of the hot rod. It was either this or taking a plane, and Gallywix would be a fool to trust a hobgoblin to fly him to safety. Driving was simply a mildly better alternative. Without any more delays, Gallywix would signal for the hobgoblin to begin their departure, leaving the pleasure palace behind them and beginning their journey to Bilgewater Harbor. Azshara, Wilderness. Roaring into the wilderness of Azshara, the hot rod moved at a swift speed but would experience drag thanks to the weight of its cargo. It carried 3 hobgoblins, 1 trade prince, and enough loot to get the Bilgewater cartel up and running again once transported to safety. This hindered its full potential, but was of little concern to Gallywix, who sat comfortably in the back seat. In the corner of Gallywix's eye though, he would spot smoke rising in the distance. If he had to guess, it was coming from the Orgrimmar Rocketway exchange. Whether it was destroyed or not was of little issue to him. His focus on this though would not last. An explosion as loud as thunder and just as destructive would take place all the way back at the pleasure palace. Bits of rocky debris would be launched in nearly every direction, with pebbles hitting against the metal of the hot rod. Sitting up, Gallywix would look behind him at what had occurred, only to be met with a sight of absolute horror.
Oh, sweet motherlode.
As the dust and smoke cleared, Gallywix would see that the monument to his likeness had been struck by artillery of some sort. Half of its rocky form was missing, with the rest being cracked and scorched by the flames and impact of the explosion. This truly was a sign that this whole experience for Gallywix was an unending nightmare.
Wah!
Towards the northern gates of Orgrimmar, Horde forces have begun to march into Azshara. While their numbers were harmed during the siege and divided between Durotar and Azshara, their presence alone was a sign that Garrosh had full intentions to bring back Azshara under his control. With no signs of support, Bilgewater goblins still on the mainland would either begin to surrender en masse or attempt to flee to try and get to the harbor. Those who did flee would be pursued by mounted warsong raiders who would run the goblins down before they could reach the coast. The howls of direwolves and the roars of their orc riders would echo through the trees. Gallywix would very much hear this over the engine of his hot rod. Peering behind him once again, the trade prince would be able to spot 3 warsong raiders who had spotted him. One raider upon the back of their wolf would notch an arrow in their bow before pulling it back and letting it fly. The arrow would fly towards the hot rod, narrowly missing Gallywix and his mooks as it plunged into the hot rod's stereo. Sparks would fly from it while distorted audio from a local goblin radio station would blare out. Huddling down to avoid incoming danger, Gallywix would bark out orders to his driver as the trade prince remained out of sight of his pursuers.
Step on it!
Already stepped on, boss.
And step on it again! Lose 'em!
Hearing the trade prince's orders, the hobgoblin driver would quickly slam his fist against the stereo to shut it off before pressing down on the accelerator. Even with the increase in speed, the weight of the cargo upon the hot rod still slowed it down, with the presence of the raiders being felt as they nipped at their heels. Maneuvering past trees and sending wildlife fleeing, the hot rod would keep going, but would soon have another issue come forward. One of the raiders would soon be able to ride up close to the hot rod and ready to attack from the side. Spotting this, Gallywix would not hesitate to bark out another order to his hobgoblin security in the backseat with him.
Do something, you knob goblin!
With little to work with currently, the mook in question would reach for the nearest thing he could possibly toss at the raider. The thing in question would be a sack of coins that was stuffed into the backseat alongside him and Gallywix.
Not the money, damn it! Not the money!
Standing up to look at their pursuer, the hobgoblin would balance himself within the moving car as he did not hesitate to toss the sack at them. The raw strength of the mook combined with the force of the sack of coins would succeed in striking the raider in the face and sending them into a tumble.
Sorry, boss.
Once all of this is over, I'm ditching you lot for the next band of mercenaries I see. Mark my words!
The coast of Azshara would soon come into sight. its waves lightly crash against the shore and Bilgewater Harbor would be in sight. Charging towards the water, the hot rod would go headfirst into it with its wheels beginning to invert on themselves. Replacing them would be flotation devices to allow for the vehicle to float across. Money well spent by Gallywix, with it clearly being an investment that has paid off. Lifting his head from his arms, Gallywix would look at his surroundings and see their pursuers were no longer near and that they had begun to sail towards Bilgewater Harbor. Taking one last glance at the shore as the hot rod sailed to Bilgewater Harbor, Gallywix could not help but smirk widely at the sight of his pursuers soon becoming distant figures with the trade prince getting away scot-free.
So long, suckers! Freedom, here I come.
Azshara, Bilgewater Harbor, Docks. As Gallywix made his approach towards Bilgewater Harbor, the current situation overwhelmed the Goblin metropolis. Panic filled its streets, with the local population scurrying to brace for what's to come. Houses were boarded up, valuables, whether corn or samaflange, were stored away, and impending dread overwhelmed many of the residents. Even the local rats were ducking for cover for what may happen. Not all was hopeless. Defensive measures were enacted, ranging from artillery pieces to barricades set up by Bilgewater enforcers. If worst comes to worst, they are able to uphold a defense and maybe even wait out Garrosh's forces for a while. How long that would be is beyond any of them. Upon landing on the shore of the harbor, Gallywix would be the first to disembark. His Khono skin boots would press down on the wet sand as he looked out at the boardwalk of Bilgewater Harbor. The trade prince would not hesitate to make his presence known as he moved to climb onto a cargo crate and declare his presence.
Residents of Bilgewater Harbor, your trade prince has arrived! Come and make yourselves useful for once by getting my yacht ready to set sail.
The trade prince would be left unanswered by the masses of Bilgewater Harbor. He would be left silent as he watched locals run right by him and not even offer a second glance in his direction. Scolding from being ignored, Gallywix would look around at the scene that was taking place in the harbor, with his eyes soon landing upon the ships that were still at port. Steamboats that were far from the quality of his yacht still lined the harbor, with none of them appearing to be taking off anytime soon. Peering out at the mouth of the harbor, Gallywix would finally realize the full extent of the situation here and the newly thrown wrench in his plan. Within the mouth of the harbor, a blockade of horde vessels had formed, heavily armed and focusing solely on preventing vessels from departing Bilgewater Harbor. This task was being more than fulfilled as the burning remains of a steamboat that tried to escape could be seen slowly sinking into the water. Bilgewater Harbor was trapped. Staring out at the blockade, Gallywix would at first be silent and at a loss. His plan was now muddled and he needed a plan B. It just so happened there may just be one here in Bilgewater Harbor. Gallywix had an idea that was both mad and genius, as all goblin ideas should be. Turning to his mooks who were now unloading the treasure from the back of the hot rod, the trade prince would deliver them new orders.
Load up the yacht and get her ready to set sail. I got something I need to do first.
Without another word, Gallywix would depart and begin to walk the boardwalk, passing by panicking locals as he began to maneuver across the city. As he did so, he would come across another surprising sight that would make him halt in his tracks. Not too far down the docks, coordinating a group of locals, Monty Gazlowe would be spotted by Gallywix. The leader of Ratchet was corralling people towards a steamboat currently at port. It was a small and dingy looking ship, far from anything impressive, with it being the typical sort of boat used by the locals of Ratchet. Why in the world Gazlowe was here with it was far beyond Gallywix. In all intents and purposes, this was his turf. As Gazlowe continued to lead people to his steamboat, it would not be long till he would spot the trade prince beginning to make his approach towards Gazlowe with a scowl across his face. Gazlowe would halt his efforts, standing his ground as his competitor soon stood right in front of him.
What in the hell are you doing here, Gazlowe? This is my turf, and you are intruding on it, you grease monkey.
Against my better judgments, I'm here to get my fellow gobs out of this mess and take whoever I can with me back to Ratchet.
At first only offering a scoff to Gallywix's demands, Monty would wear a smug grin as he spoke.
In that thing? You'd be better off swimming out of here than cruising on that piece of junk.
She's small and fast enough to get past the blockade. Reliable too.
You really think that dinky little tugboat is gonna get you past those warships?
Certainly. You got any bright ideas of your own?
Nothing I'd tell a cockroach like you. Besides, this is my people. You really think that they will follow you out of here instead of their trade prince?
Better than staying here with Garrosh marching his goons this way. We got ourselves a bad hand. And the way I see it, we'll be a lot better off folding in hopes of a better one elsewhere.
Well, I ain't folding. I'm aiming for the jackpot, setback or not.
Don't have to be that way. We still have room to offer on the ship. I'll go as far as offer you a spot with us.
Fat chance. I ain't stepping 1 foot onto that floating coffin when I have a yacht to sail me away to paradise.
I'd like to see that yacht of yours outrun those warships with all the crap you're loading in with it. Just come with us and escape this mess, you stubborn shyster.
Stubborn and determined not to lower himself down to the point he accepts help from a junk peddler like Gazlowe, Gallywix would point his cane at his rival. The end of the cane would tap against Gazlowe's chest as Gallywix offered him venom-laced words.
I'd rather take a walk through Stranglethorn with a band of Kurubashi cannibals than accept any handouts from the likes of you. I got my own escape plan, and it ain't gonna involve you or any of these ingrates joining you.
Turning away to return to his route, Gallywix would not offer a single glance towards Gazlowe as he stomps toward his plan B. Gazlowe would take a moment to watch the trade prince march away. Shaking his head slowly, Gazlowe would soon turn away to make his way to his ship as he mutters to himself.
That gob really is hopeless.
Azshara, Bilgewater Harbor, Gallywix's Pride, Command Center. Upon the hill that Bilgewater Harbor constructed itself around, the centerpiece of the metropolis would rest. Gallywix's Pride, a massive cannon mounted at the top of Bilgewater Harbor. It is said to be one of the largest artillery pieces ever seen within Azeroth, a marvel of goblin engineering and said to hold pure destructive capability. This power has not yet been shown, as it has mostly been collecting dust, with it remaining aimed at Stormwind for the day it is finally approved for use by the warchief, which has yet to come. Within its command center, Bilgewater engineers work tirelessly to ensure it remains fully operational. Consoles and cogs create a symphony within the command center, while Bilgewater enforcers equipped with the best rifles money can buy keep guard. With such a prized weapon, security must be upheld to prevent sabotage. At the helm of this operation will be one Mezde Dullwrench, a Bilgewater capo assigned to supervise security within the command center. A true goblin through and through, she savored the position of power that she currently had, even if she was unable to use it to the fullest. She was to keep watch of things here like those before her since the cannon was created. The symphony of machinery would be interrupted with the rhythm of a cane striking against the metallic floor. Entering the command center, Gallywix marched with determination past security and the scurrying engineers. Mezde, spotting the trade prince, would not hesitate to rush to him and attempt to keep with his pace as she walked by his side.
Trade prince, sir. We got ourselves a pretty bad situation here. The blockade ain't budging, and we lost.
Yeah, whatever. I got myself a plan on how to handle this mess.
Really, boss?
Halting in her tracks, Mezde would watch Gallywix make his way to one of the main control consoles for the cannon, which he began to examine. Gallywix continued to speak, his voice being confident and determined.
I've worked too hard to build this cartel to let some meathead like Garrosh get the better of me, or some schmuck like Gazlowe think I need any handouts. I'm gonna show them all who the trade prince is around here. About time you show the Horde the true capability of this cannon. Real shame it's gonna be used on them and not the Alliance. Oh well, business is business.
Are you suggesting we use the cannon, boss?
No, I ain't suggesting. I'm ordering! Ready an artillery shell! I wanna smash right in the middle of that blockade!
To everyone in the command center, it would become clear what Gallywix intended to do. Gallywix's pride was to be used to open fire upon the blockade, creating a gap within its formation for Gallywix's yacht to slip right out and make a speedy getaway. Silence would fill the command center, with the exception of its machinery. Not a single soul would dare speak about the situation at hand. No one here knew the capability of the cannon, a side effect to goblin engineering. Grand marvels that can rival the gnomes at the cost of no real idea on what they will do once created. Maybe it will go as planned and destroy the blockade. Maybe it will destroy all of Bilgewater Harbor and Azshara. Perhaps the cannon will just end up not working at all because of one misplaced gear or samaflange. It truly was a roll of the dice, which Gallywix was more than ready to gamble on if it means he stays on top. No matter the outcome, at this very moment, Gallywix felt like he was truly at the top of the world. He was the trade prince of the Bilgewater cartel and one of the wealthiest goblins alive. He had the economic know-how and ingenious planning all goblins strive for. This was the day he shall truly mark himself in the history books as a trade prince of legend. This was, sadly, not to be. In his moment of grandeur, Gallywix would be snapped back to reality when the sound of rifles began to be cocked. Slowly turning away from the console to look behind him, Gallywix would be met with the sight of his enforcers aiming their rifles at him. They had surrounded him with their sights laid upon him. It would be at this moment Gallywix would come to the realization that he has officially been double-crossed.
You're old news, Gallywix. If you fire this cannon, you'll be signing all our death warrants. Oh, we'd rather be on the winning side of this fiasco than with the has-been trade prince.
Gallywix, while at a loss for words, could not help but open his mouth to attempt to say something. Perhaps he can still snake his way out of this. Before even a single word could escape his mouth, a sudden pain would ring through his head. The butt of a rifle had struck the side of Gallywix's head, forcing him to the ground where the trade prince would lay. Gallywix's hand would lose its hold on his cane as the trade prince's vision slowly went black. Durotar, Orgrimmar, Garrosh's throne room. It's good to be on the winning team, Siegecrafter Helix Blackfuse thought to himself. Of course, as a mercenary, you would always prefer to be on the winning side. It's the main reason for your employment, but something about this time felt different. This was more than just a job to Helix. This was a total victory. Today has been a busy day for the Blackfuse company. They played a key part in the defense of Orgrimmar. Their war machines passed with acceptable results, with the exception of the Juggernaut, which was lost in the fighting. And now they just killed two birds with one stone. Bilgewater Harbor was theirs, and Gallywix was in chains. All of this, and his company did not even break a sweat. This was quite the payday to be sure, with Helix being certain the warchief will be willing to pay quite the hefty price for further assistance from his company. Here he was, standing within the throne room of Warchief Garrosh Hellscream, awaiting his return so Helix may relay recent news from Azshara. The torches that illuminated the room flickered and danced while the distant sounds of marching soldiers could be heard beyond the metal walls of the stronghold. Helix stood silently, hands folded behind his back, while a Blackfuse radio operator stood nearby tinkering with his back-mounted transmitter. The two would share mild small talk, discussing the company's performance and the fall of the Juggernaut during the siege. A setback for sure, but one that can be tended to with improvements made to a possible future Mark II model. Their chatter would go silent when the heavy sounds of footsteps began to echo through the hallways leading to the throne room. Standing at attention, Helix would await the warchief's entrance. When Garrosh entered the throne room, the markings of the recent battle still adorned him. One had to admire the warchief's resilience and lack of strain being shown. Garrosh offered no glance towards Helix or the radio operator. He continued towards his throne, with Helix hurrying to walk by his side. With Garrosh's long strides, Helix was made to quicken his pace to keep up with the orc.
Warchief, we received news from Azshara. Bilgewater Harbor has surrendered with its enforcers waving the white flag. Seems they've turned on Gallywix and are handing him over to us on a silver platter.
One less rebel leader to be a thorn within my side.
Reaching his throne, Garrosh would sit down upon it. Even in a state of victory, Garrosh showed no signs of relaxation. He sat stiff-backed with his hands holding on to the armrests of his throne. Helix stood before him, hands behind his back as he gazed up at the warchief.
Blackfuse company at your disposal, warchief. What are your orders?
Begin by transporting your company to the harbor to occupy it. Lay claim to the machinery there. I want the cannon there to be fully operational. Any and all wealth previously owned by Gallywix is to be used for the war machine. Leave no stone unturned when claiming the traitor's spoils.
Say, what you want us to do with Gallywix? Already started dealing with his lieutenants. Want us to give him the same treatment?
As much as it would please me to see the pig gutted, I know of a greater punishment for the dethroned trade prince. Send him to the Mountain Foot strip mine. There, he shall witness his precious cartel stripped from him, as he is made to labor in the same hazardous toil he has profited from. This is a punishment worse than death for the likes of him.
As Helix listened to this, even he could not help but agree. As a goblin, to be stripped of all your hard-earned wealth and tossed in some hole to rot away really is a punishment worse than death. He can only imagine what that obese green blob will do when handed a pickaxe and told to mine out a whole quarry. Helix gives Gallywix a month before he dies from exhaustion. That is on the generous side, of course.
No problem. It will be done, warchief.
Offering a final salute to the warchief, Helix would turn on his heels and signal to the Blackfuse radio operator to follow, as they would soon depart from the throne room. They would leave Garrosh to his thoughts as yet another enemy falls to his new horde.